with. I mean, there are certain people whose work I follow very closely. I think Massimo Bonzi is a very important guy in this line of work. Massimo Bonzi is an Italian electronics engineer and interface specialist who built this device called the Arduino. And if your people have never heard of the Arduino and its role in sort of physical computing, acting as an interface between software and genuine machinery, and also, you know, the way he's set up this particular system, he's really an important figure and somebody who's had a great success with you know, powerful and deep implications that I don't think are properly appreciated. So, you know, Massimo is somebody I take very seriously. Gosh, who else? Well, you need somebody from the, you know, augmented reality world, somebody who really sort of gets it about registration issues. Because, you know, that's sort of also a technically obscure thing that turns out to be absolutely super important. And I don't know, I guess the person in the world who sort of knows most about it is Tish Shute, who's a blogger and sort of augmented reality booster. She's a woman who sometimes runs augmented reality event in California. And she's just super knowledgeable about the field. So, you know, if you had to have sort of one AR person, it would be Tish. And then I suspect you might want somebody from the manufacturing world, somebody who's involved in 3D manufacturing or 3D rapid prototypers. And, you know, there's a lot of people involved in this. It sort of depends on where you want to go. You might want to talk to a designer who's doing some really top-end work, or you might want to go hang out with someone like Bree Pettis from Make Magazine, who's just a kind of super fireball activist in this line of work. He's the guy who started the desktop fad. I don't call it a revolution. The MakerBot. Bree Pettis is Mr. MakerBot. And since he's a former high school teacher, he's quite good at putting these things, difficult matters, into approachable, you know, formulas and language people can understand and identify with. And he's also quite charismatic in his own geeky way. So, you know, I mean, I'm erring on the side of the cyberculture people there. I mean, there's nothing like pulling in a CEO of a multi-million-dollar company. If you want people to show up for your event, you know, you might want more financial firepower than that, somebody from government or industry. You know, I would err on the side of somebody doing demos because, you know, it's easy to sort of have people come in and debate definitions of these very diffuse things like, okay, mine's augmented and yours is virtual and yours is 3D and mine is like less 3D. So show and tell often sort of overcomes that kind of stuff. I mean, I've been known to show up at like fabbing conferences and just throw fabbed objects into the audience because you can always talk about stuff like additive fabrication, but when you actually like just distribute cheap things that were formerly impossible, that is really a very compelling thing to do. And you know, and to run videos of things is quite interesting if your AV is working, but objects are even better. It's just, there's always something going on that is sort of without historical precedent that's like the genuine novelty, as opposed to the sort of sci-fi rhetoric of, you know, gosh, wow, that blows my mind. And I think those things, those sort of existence proofs are super valuable. Right. Well, you know, I'm a science fiction writer, and I guess you would call me a cyberculture activist now, because I blog and I teach and I write and I travel a lot. And oh gosh, I'm a professor at a media philosophy school. You know, I'm a typical example of somebody who's very active on the internet and who found his disciplinary silos being destroyed by network society. I'm a pundit. I'm a guru. a great many things are possible, but if you're going to do anything effective in this way, you really don't want to talk about the future. You want to talk about scenarios of possible things. And you want to frame them in the language of the people who you expect to be reading this, because, or accessing it or whatever. Because it's like talking about the future of plumbing. I mean, it's just, there is a future for plumbing, and it's very important to people who are plumbers, but you run the risk of missing out and just, sort of squandering your opportunity by not trying to focus what you're doing. So, I would divide it up into the classic futurist quadrant, and I would try to find the two change drivers that you think are most important in this. And then I would try to come up with scenarios that involve the people in your line of work. I don't know. I mean, let's just say that you imagine the two major problems in 3D are something like legality and illegality. It's like, is it regulated or poorly regulated? And is it really high tech or is it rather low tech? So then you'd have four possible worlds, which would be low tech and illegal, low tech and legalized, high tech and legalized, and high tech and illegalized. And you'd end up with a scattering of technical possibilities that sort of work into these different possible futures. And the ones that are most important are probably the ones that have some kind of role in all four of those possibilities. In other words, low tech and illegalized would probably be areas like Dhaka in Bangladesh or Nigeria or a Sao Paulo favela. So, it would really help you and sort of sharpen your mind about the possible future of these objects if you can bring yourself to think about them. What would be good in a Sao Paulo favela? Or what role would this have in the sleaziest area of London? Not the top end part, the well-regulated part, the part where the video cameras are always clicking, but what role would this have among, say, the Pakistani immigrant population in East London? Okay, now that's what future forecasting is really good for. It's stretching you into an area where you wouldn't have looked otherwise because it's just not part of your normal scene. And I don't think it's an accident that the most technically vibrant part of contemporary London is Silicon Roundabout, which is basically East London, cockneyfied, bombed, cheap, run down, sleazy, full of immigrants. I mean, that's where it's really happening in London right now. Yeah, handsets. Absolutely. I mean, smartphones. Smartphones are, they're ubiquitous computation existent in the world. And the statistics around the growth and the spread of these devices are amazing. I mean, they really make the revolution in Silicon Valley look like a Victorian railroad. It's incredible. If you had told me 30 years ago, when I first started work as a science fiction writer, that there would be electronic devices that were more popular than toothbrushes, that were more ubiquitous than running water, that were used by people who had not learned to read, I would have said that was, an extreme forecast. I would have considered that fantastic. Not even science fiction. That would have seemed to me like a flight of extreme fancy. But it's true. And not only that, but they're multiplying. I mean, there's not just, in areas where they're available, people carry 2 or 3 smartphones. They don't even bother with one. The effect that it's had on every aspect of life. I mean, we're having revolutions based around these devices now in the Middle East and other places. They're the keystone of the Spanish Rebellion, the Greek upheavals. They're all based around getting the message out and coagulating flash mobs of people in 3D spaces with smartphones. And this is just like a whisper of what's coming. It's and they're real. I mean, they're not only real, they're even sort of vulgar and banal. I mean, nobody looks twice at them now. It's a fantastic thing. I mean, it's what distinguishes this decade from the decades of the previous century.